Hey, what up? It's your boy Zite, and today I just wanted to talk about most of the viable Druid specs in Classic World of Warcraft. So I've been asked by a couple people what they should spec while leveling, what they should spec at different phases, and I just wanted to talk about all the specs in general that people would use as a Druid in World of Warcraft Classic. So some of the different specs are a little bit more versatile, where there's a little bit of leniency in where you can put points in different places. It's not too big of a deal. Most of the time, it's really just up to preference. So there's a lot of specs that you could go as a druid, and some are definitely better than others. There's even some specs that encompass different roles throughout the raids, and I think that's really fun to do multiple roles within the raid. I'm also going to cover some DPS specs and some tanking specs, although bears are considered not as good as warriors in general, and cat DPS you pretty much have to try extremely hard to even compete with anybody, and you have to go way over the top. Moonkin, you go really fast, and a lot of hardcore guilds will not accept you. Anyway, like I said, certain talent points, like Thick Hide and Feral Instinct, often you could just interchange with each other. It's up to preference or what you're doing in game, more often PvP or PVE. So I want to get into leveling. So it's a little bit weird. Leveling at first, there's not that many useful talent points to increase your speed. So actually it's best to just go balance and grab these talent points in the balance tree. It's going to give you probably the fastest. It's not a big deal. You could just go straight into Feral if you wanted to. It's really no big deal, but it's a little bit faster. So right here I say respec. When you would notice that I don't have Feral charge. You pretty much want to prioritize the movement speed from feline swiftness and get sharpened claws. You want to finish out your Feral, you want to get Fearer, and then you want to put all the rest of your points in balance. So this is pretty much your full leveling spec throughout Classic. Now, PVE specs. So this is a deep Resto PVE spec. I'm not going to talk about it too much. You pretty much grab every useful thing in the healing tree, and you just take nature's grass. So anytime you're out in the open world PvPing or just herbing or doing anything in general, you could use it to escape. So now we're going to talk about Moonglow spec, a much better healing spec than the previous spec. This spec is most likely going to be used in like AQ40 and Axe. Nature's Grace helps you not get sniped by other healers, and Moonglow makes you a bit more mana efficient while healing. So this spec is a Swiftmend PVE spec. It's really good for tank healing. You could Swiftmend your main tank. You got Nature Swiftness Healing Touch. You could buff the main tank with improved Thorns. It's really good overall for a PVE spec. A lot of druids will probably be running something like this in the early stages. Also, improved rejuvenation is really good earlier because it scales off base, so it's really good. So this is Heart of the Wild Resto Offtank healing. So this is a very versatile spec. You could tank some fights, decurse some fights, and heal some fights based on what the raid needs you to do. And you just carry a second set for tanking, and you could do everything within a raid with this spec. It's really nice. I love it. So this next spec is basically just a bear feral tank. So you're just like a main tank, or you're tanking a fight, or you're tanking more often within the raid. You might go something like this. However, I usually prefer the other one because there's a lot of fights where you just want to stand around and decurse, or you want to help heal the rest of the raid instead of trying to be a tank. Let the warriors do it, but sometimes you do need to off tank. It's really good to have a druid off tank sometimes. So this next spec that I'm going to talk about is a cat DPS PVE spec. So you're going to need an item called the Wolf's Head Helm. It's a level 40 druid item. It can be crafted, and it's best in slot pretty much until the whole game. It's never not best in slot. And this is probably the best spec, or this is the best spec for cat form DPS. It takes advantage of Fury, Shred. You're just going to shred spam with the Wolf's Head Helm and the Fury talent, and that's going to be where most of your damage comes from. So now, if you want to be a Moonkin in PvE, this is probably going to be the spec you're going. This is the most mana efficient spec that you could possibly get, and you get Moonkin form. I really wouldn't advise being a Moonkin in PVE and vanilla, but if you're going to, this is probably what you're going to run. So I'm about to get into some PvP specs. So since we're on the topic of Moonkins, let's talk about a few Moonkin and balanced PvP specs first. So the first one I want to talk about is a little bit more of an aggressive spec. You go into the feral tree, get feral charge, brutal impact, thick hide, and then you have nature's reach and improved starfire, gives you a chance to stun people. You still get 1 point in nature's grasp. I don't think you need to get any more points in nature's grasp. Usually you get them with the 1, and you still take 2 points in the natural shapeshifter and put 5 points into fear, which is really good because it allows you to charge immediately when you get into bear form. So this is a balanced spec for PvP that doesn't get the chicken, and you get nature's swiftness instead. So this is really versatile. I really like this one. Actually, I don't really PvP as balanced, but if I were, I pretty much wouldn't use the chicken form. I would probably run something like this, to be honest, me personally. I don't really like balance. I'm usually just a healer, I tank. So this is a feral PvP generic. It kind of favors the cat form. I mean, feral PvP specs are like really versatile. It really depends on if you want to prioritize bear form or cat form, like thick hide, feral instincts. There's so many different ways you can make feral DPS specs, or PvP specs rather. So this is a cat favored Heart of the Wild PvP build. You still want to grab feral charge, but you definitely want to go feral instincts for that increased stealth, and having fairy fire, and you go all the way down to, you know, nature's swiftness. It's really good spec. I like this spec a lot. There's another spec right here is basically the same exact thing, except you favor the bear form stuff. I usually try to take thick hide if I really want to do that, and I definitely take brutal impact with this build. Both builds have fairy fire, of course, so you never don't want to take that. And of course, nature's swiftness. I love having nature's swiftness, even as like a DPSer in PvP, which I generally don't do anyway. I love to carry the flag. Speaking of carrying the flag, let's talk about Heart of the Wild flag carrying build. So this one, I really like this one. If you're Tauren, you could take the Nature's Grasp talent and put it in Heart of the Wild, but if you're a Night Elf, I really like having the Nature's Grasp talent. I definitely like to have Brutal Impact, Feral Instincts, and Thick Hide. I don't really take too many aggressive talents. It's mostly about survival. And then you just go down to Nature's Swiftness, takes a couple of these healing talents, and you definitely need Furor if you're carrying the flag with this build, because you need to be able to charge immediately when you jump into bear form. But Heart of the Wild is just like one of the best talents in Classic World of Warcraft. I love Heart of the Wild. So that's why I've probably shown you like 5 or 6 Heart of the Wild builds in this one video. And so now I'm going to show you another flag carrying build that goes deep into the Resto tree. It's a Swiftmend Resto spec, and you definitely want to have charge in PvP like pretty much all the time. And so you get thick hide, you get brutal impacts. I usually take 5 in Nature's Grasp, so as soon as they hit me, they get rooted. So there's no better place to put your talents. Improved Mark of the Wild. Generally somebody else takes that, especially if you're flag carrying. You always have Furor. And you take a lot of the good healing passives. I think in stage 1 or phase 1, improved rejuvenation is going to be much better than some of the other talent points because it scales off base. So later on in later phases, improved rejuvenation talent is not going to be as useful. But I think in phase 1, I think it's going to be really useful. But most of the spec is set up and designed to keep you alive or escape as easy as possible, kind of like the last spec where you don't take any offensive talents, you just take defensive talents and healing talents. So I didn't go too in depth about any of the builds. I just exposed them, put them out there. If anybody had any questions about any of the builds or want me to go deeper into the builds or why you would do certain things within the builds, I could leave a comment. I'd be more than happy to answer you. But pretty much all of the builds I've exposed, I'm going to use in Classic. I don't think I'm going to use any build that I haven't put out there. Most of the builds I'm going to use are in this video, pretty much through all stages of Classic, at different stages of Classic. Any questions, comments, leave them down below. Like and subscribe. if anybody's wondering, I'm gonna let the rest of this play out just in case anybody was like, how did the dead mines run end? So spoiler alert, we didn't kill Van Cleef, but we killed literally every other mob within the dungeon. Anyways, I'm Zeit. Classic is in 2 days. I'm so excited. I can't wait. I'm getting more excited every day that passes, and I just can't wait to play. I'll see you guys next time.